Placing my hand flat against the enormous buoy's textured paint, I gazed past low-flying pelicans on the horizon. My 49cc Honda Ruckus has dutifully carried me over 1,500 miles to Key West, the southernmost point in the United States from my home in Virginia, on about 15 gallons of gas. The ride down was only a shakedown cruise as I plugged Dead Horse, Alaska into my abused Garmin Nuvi 500, over 600 miles to my destination. All the key lime pie and rum runners in the world couldn't have prepared me for the slow cross-continental journey ahead towards the frozen tundra of Alaska's North Slope. In a vacant, palm-covered lot the following morning, I stumbled out of my hammock into the humid darkness, eased into my ripe arrowstitch, and set out into the inky pre-dawn stillness. Reflective highway markers form an arrow to the horizon's vanishing point down the two-lane causeway over the ocean. The salty sea air mixed with the pleasantries of rotting fish and seaweed make my stomach turn, and I regretted not having eaten breakfast. The little single is humming along reliably, topped out at 40 miles an hour with 60 pounds of camping gear, spare parts, and fuel. In my mirror, a pair of headlights grow brighter as a semi barrels down at me at 60 miles an hour. The frightful crosswinds off the cargo container toss the scooter around like a dinghy in a gale, and I'm in no mood to go swimming. Unlike most extended motorcycle adventures, I start my day with no destination or route, merely a direction of travel. The relaxed pace of my scooter, nicknamed La Tortuga, makes interstate highway travel illegal and frankly dangerous. Travel times are always doubled on the scooter, which translates to twice as much time in an area and the ability to see and absorb twice as much about an environment. The chunky 10-inch tires ride just to the left of the white line on America's blue highways, the forgotten two-lane double-digit state routes of yesteryear. There once was much more to the American experience than box stores and fast food joints. The back roads of the South are dotted by a variety of farm stands and rusty truck beds overflowing with regionally distinct produce. I've bitten into juicy tropical dragon fruit outside Miami, dripping red watermelon in Central Florida, and salty boiled peanuts, pronounced bald, in Tuscaloosa. Each individual vendor was just as unique and memorable as their product. Rolling across rural northern Arkansas, I noticed a humming sound inside the drive case, accompanied by a decrease in top speed to 30 miles an hour. Much to the relief of the trail of traffic following me, I pulled into a service station manned by two mechanics with young faces and aged eyes. They kindly offered me the use of an impact gun to remove my drive belt, variator, and weights, all of which were damaged from excessive heat and load with the demands put upon this engine when it only has a piston the size of a shot glass. Fortunately, I carry sets of spares, and the repair offered me a chance to interact with some good old boys that would otherwise be fishing or mudding than working in the sweltering darkness of their shop. Making use of the long daylight hours, I averaged 250 miles a day, all while taking breaks for aimless misadventures and discovering local history. I buzzed through mile after mile of waving grain, stopping every 100 or so to fill up the little bike and chat with the never-ending parade of unique locals. Everybody's a character. Riding through the immense wheat and cornfields of the Midwest offered unimpeded horizons and straight roads to clear my mind. Gusty western winds buffeted the lightweight scooter, laboring to maintain 30 miles an hour with the throttle wide open. The strain led to numerous impromptu coffee breaks to stretch and decompress. I'm kneeling in a dusty ditch, brewing up a cup of joe, when a white work truck comes to a stop and the window rolls down. The red-faced, middle-aged farmer asks if I need help, offers a water bottle, then begins to drive off. Stopping in about 10 feet, he reverses and holds out a box of freshly made cheese danishes. "Here, have a happy Sunday." Few foods compare to surprise pastries in the middle of nowhere. The weather held just long enough for me to reach the front range of the Rockies near Denver, Colorado. A dark line of thunderstorms raced in my direction, pulling warm air into a billowing updraft. Chaotic fingers of lightning exploded around me in the open grassland, and I hummed the tune, "Nowhere to Run, Nowhere to Hide." After a few miles and thought, considering my mortality and sanity, I found a leaky-roofed car wash offering shelter from the passing deluge. Pressing on, I climbed into Wyoming's high-range deserts and up the Wind River towards the mighty Continental Divide. At over 9,000 feet, the anemic engine struggled to sustain 30 miles an hour, providing more time to photograph and absorb the towering snow-capped mountains and green alpine meadows. In Yellowstone Park, tourists and SUVs sped past in a hurry to stop soon at the next geologic phenomena, geyser or waterfall. You can take the people out of the city, but you can't take the frantic pace out of the city people. The ruckus quietly navigated herds of bison in the grasslands, and at one point was forced away at top speed from a grizzly bear, who most certainly could outrun it. Glacier International Park's Going to the Sun Road climbs rapidly to 6,466 feet and offered a final endurance test for the little bike before passing into Canada. U-shaped valleys filled with thick forests of spruce tumble down from jagged peaks. I cut the engine at the top of Logan Pass and coasted for over 4 miles downhill. The whir of rubber on asphalt and rush of wind in the helmet seemed lonely without the familiar single-cylinder exhaust note. To my surprise, Canadian immigration let me and my curious steed in after a few extra questions regarding employment and available funds. Sound judgment on their behalf, factoring in my disheveled appearance and mud-splattered scooter. Slipping the passport back in my breast pocket, I motored into North Alberta into the Canadian Rockies, and they loomed overhead. The fat little tires crunched their way down sharp gravel roads, snaking through narrow and steep valleys. The algae feeding on glacial flour turns the frigid rivers a murky turquoise. On the Icefields Parkway, brown clouds of smoke mushroom skyward from a raging forest fire. The flames are visible as firefighters and helicopters attempt to slow its advance in this dry climate. After a few days spent riding a pristine wilderness and exploring the enchanting forests, I crossed into British Columbia and motored on towards the city of Prince George. The contemplative solitude was beginning to make me miss the company of friends and former coworkers I left behind. While stocking up on peanut butter and fruit in a chain box store, a local resident struck up a conversation with me after parking beside my scooter. Undaunted by my odor, he invited me over for brats, known in Canada as smokies, and to offer a level yard to pitch my tent. In the morning I emerged into the sunlight, noticing the ground around me covered with bear scat. Apparently suburban apple trees are akin to a buffet for the local black bear, and I camped directly in their dining room. I stopped briefly in Dawson Creek, mile 0 of the Alaska Highway, for a parking lot oil and air filter change. The Jiffy Lube attendant must have taken pity on me, and he gave me a free bottle of 10W30 and advice to watch out for trucks. The acrid smoke from forest fires painted the sky in a muddled kaleidoscope of refracted green, purple, and orange clouds, so dark street lamps remained lit at noon. The numerous bends and steep grades traverse 1,387 miles through a land of permafrost, mosquito-filled bogs, First Nation reservations, and seemingly unending mountain ranges. I was only 300 miles out of Fairbanks when I received a text inviting me to a salmon bake that evening. Stopping for only 30 minutes total that day, the rich flavor of that freshly caught Copper River salmon justified my numb butt and all-out slog to arrive by 7 p.m. The following week was spent repairing cracked welds and spooning on a fresh set of tires for the final 495 miles to the Arctic Circle. The treacherous Dalton Highway welcomed me with a blinding splash of mud from passing oil tankers. Negotiating locations such as Oh Shit Corner and the roller coaster, I had to keep an eye out for the oncoming trucks covering the entire road as well as passing rigs, heavily loaded with supplies for the oil industry up north. Exhausted at the sunny end of each day, I'd barely make it in my tent before falling asleep. Fresh snow blanketed the surrounding peaks of the Brooks Range on the last morning of my northbound trip. Only 240 miles of wilderness, mountains, and tundra lay before me and my ultimate goal, Prudhoe Bay. The inadequate tires struggled to maintain traction, climbing up Adigan Pass in a howling late July snowstorm. Arriving at the top, I realized I could continue on into the frightening conditions toward my destination, or abandon my dream, turning around for the comfort of Coldfoot and its warm truck stop. I'll credit hypothermic decision-making for prodding me on down the north slope, deeper into the snow and sleet. Skin-reddening Arctic wind would not deter me from my goal. I had not come this far only to give up. A 15-mile construction zone with loose boulders and freezing mud was made even more miserable when a bolt rattled loose and my red fuel bottle spilled across the road before an impatient semi. Remarkably, he dodged the obstacle with learned skill as I scurried to retrieve my scooter's lifeblood. Out there, a single poor decision or mistake could mean death. A narrow band of sunlight broke through burdened clouds, illuminating a cluster of warmly insulated trailers under the shadow of a tall drilling rig. I made it. In little over a month, La Tortuga had carried me over 6,000 miles from the tropical Caribbean breezes to the harsh frozen hell of Dead Horse. A wave of adrenaline relief accompanied the smile growing across my now bearded face. I had reached the northernmost point on a public road in North America, and my appetite for adventure was more ravenous than ever before.